All right, well, welcome to our webinar focused on boards. And this title of today's session is Building Boards for Today and Tomorrow. And I am joined by three incredible panelists and one colleague who is helping run the technology. So the whole point of today's session will be to have a conversation. And I want to encourage you to put questions throughout the session. Please put them in chat so we can make it responsive. And I know we've all been on webinars where there's a lot of information and content delivered, and this is going to be very different. This is meant to be conversational. So if you feel comfortable, please introduce yourself in the chat. If you have questions, my colleague Grace will be monitoring the chat, but please introduce yourself. We love being able to establish connections and build community through these webinars. So get to know each other. If you feel comfortable, put your contact information, stay in touch, because if we do this right, you'll get to know some new friends and colleagues who can help you out with boards. We were amazed at the number of people that have signed up. We have 62 people in the webinar today, and even more signed up, which says to me, it says to us that this topic is relevant and particularly relevant to today. I am the founder of Potrero Group. Many of you, because I recognize you, are people that have known us, but some of you are new to us. So we are a consultancy, national in scope consultancy that does strategic planning, does executive search, and more recently have been focused a lot on boards and board recruitment and board effectiveness. I'm pleased to be joined by three incredible colleagues, and it's fun when you get to host a webinar because you get to invite the people that you would like to hear from, and they're people I've admired and known for quite some time. They're going to introduce themselves, but I'm just going to tell you briefly why I introduced them. First on this screen is Kathy Allen, is the board doctor. You'll hear from her shortly, and we'll go in this order for introductions, Kathy and Sam and Miguel. I got to know Kathy in the public land space. She's widely known as a consultant or resource to smaller organizations in the space, and she'll tell you about that background. But particularly was excited because I got to know her because I filled in for her in a presentation when she wasn't feeling well, and I looked at her presentation and it was almost as if I had written it with some important differences. And I have ever since then, just realized I found a sister in this world that I didn't know I had, and so we're always conspiring to do fun things together. Susan Boren is going to tell you a little bit about her background. She was the board chair of a wonderful organization called NatureBridge, which is how I got to know her, but professionally had a distinguished career in corporate America. And most relevant to this panel was a partner in Spencer Stewart's board search practice, and has worked with corporate boards, nonprofit boards, small boards, and big boards. And you'll hear from her shortly. And then Miguel Gavadon, I have known probably the longest of our panelists. We served together on the Marin Community Foundation board, and I was the board chair for 2 years, and Miguel followed me, and we became fast friends, and been working on some really fun projects over time. So you're mostly going to hear from them because they're a lot more interesting than me, but I will be here to guide the conversation and to give them some questions. So we're going to be on, we're going to finish at 2:15 Pacific time. So I'm going to ask them some questions. We'll have conversation for about half an hour, and then we'll open it up to your questions. And either Grace will feed them to us, or we'll just ask you to come off of mute and ask your own questions. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to pull down the stop sharing, and I think you're going to highlight the speakers. But if Kathy, I've asked each of our panelists to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their perspective on boards for about 2 minutes each, and then we'll go into some of the questions.
Great. Thanks, Cleve. Thanks for inviting me and for including me in this. I've been looking forward to it for a while. So my name is Kathy Allen. My business name is The Board Doctor. If you know me, you know I have a lot of fun with my business name, right? This idea that there are things that we can do to help nonprofit boards get better, whether we're starting from a pretty unhealthy place or starting from a pretty healthy place, and we just want to have some continuous improvement. My business name gets me what I like, which is people approaching me to say, can I tell you about my board? Right. And we can go from there to help people make things better. As Cleve said, I do a lot of work with public lands nonprofits, and I also have a particular passion for very small nonprofits, the ones that file the 990N, the ones that don't have staff. It is a challenge to get board members into training, and we can maybe talk about that a little bit more, but that's what I really enjoy, right? Talking to board members, much more so than talking to staff about their board members, right? So I look forward to seeing that poll and seeing if we have any real board members in the room today. And I want to know how to get board members into training like this, because I think it is just really critically important. So anyway, I've been doing this work for a number of years, and I look forward to hearing your questions and seeing if I've got any perspective. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, and over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Cleve. Thanks everybody for joining today. I am so excited to be on this webinar because this is my favorite topic to talk about. I've been sitting on and serving boards for over 50 years at this point. And I've just lost my video. I don't know if you can see or hear there. I started with smaller nonprofit boards. I have had the opportunity to serve on several corporate boards. And in having those two different kinds of experiences, I realized that the issues that come up are very similar. And as I began to think about why, I realized that the same people in many cases are serving on the corporate boards who are serving on community not-for-profit boards and bringing some of the same issues to the board table. So over time, I began to be very interested in board effectiveness and board evaluation. And when I joined the international search firm, Spencer Stuart, I chose to sit in the board practice. I sat on that board and developed a board evaluation practice for them. So I'm really looking forward to your questions and talking about how to make boards more effective. So thanks for coming.
Thank you, Sam. Miguel, over to you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's an honor being in the space. Thank you, Cleve, for inviting, and it's an honor to share some space with Kathy and Sam as well. So I'm still a recovering executive director and development director for a couple of decades. That's before I started my nonprofit practice about 10 years ago. And boards have been part of all of these stories. Something that I often remind clients and colleagues of is that boards are part of the team. And so starting off with board development, first of all, that term, board development, these are folks you want to welcome as you would a staff, as a volunteer, engage as a constituent. And if the opening line is, "Ugh, my board," as was eloquently put a moment ago, that's not a good place to start. And so how is it that we welcome board members as part of the team, and how do we make it purposeful? More on that a little later. I've been part of 3 boards as a member so far. One is for a community-based nonprofit, the second community foundation, and the third national nonprofit. And very similar and contrasting experiences with all of them. As a consultant, helping folks with boards, I've been noticing my role has evolved more from being a facilitator into more of a coach, and in particular coaching the board chair. And so I'm finding that to be an interesting innovation, within the work. And it's based on experience. I remember the first and only time thus far I became a board chair. The dynamics of the room just changed literally one day to the next from the first meeting. And even everyone's faces who had already known for 3+ years shifted when I became the chair. And that's when finally it hit me, wow, okay, people actually take this title pretty seriously. And so I think there's a lot of territory and opportunity to be explored there. as far as what a chairpersonship can bring to a board. And it is absolutely essential for the leadership of the organization to partner with that chair to make things happen, to roll out both on the staff level, the community level, and of course on the board. And yeah, looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you all for terrific introductions. Thank you to everybody who has introduced themselves in the chat. Very much appreciate that. Keep that coming because it's a terrific to build. There's some incredible talent in the space. I need to give out a special shout out to Phil Kilbridge from NatureBridge. Thank you for introducing yourself. That's how I got to know Sam and how a number of us worked at NatureBridge. And so it's just a terrific organization. So great to see you, Phil. So many other people I could. I am the founder of Potrero Group. I work with about 30 boards a year, small, big, dysfunctional, functional, but I've really come to a stark belief that one of the real challenges with board members is that we tend to recruit the same people that are overly busy and often look like the people that are currently on the board. So I'm taking a quest and to try to bring on new voices, new perspectives, and people that are not traditionally on boards or just haven't been asked yet. And so we've gotten very excited about an open board search process. Sam Boren and a couple colleagues from Potrero and I just authored an article in Stanford Social Innovation Review. So I will freely admit one of my biases is that we need to bring on new board members that haven't been on boards before and reach out to a broader group of people across communities that we serve. So I will share that widely because I think we'll get better boards. I also believe that boards are really essential to our democracy in America because our nonprofit sector is so unique and so important in our country. So that's another reason I'm passionate about boards. So with that, I'm going to open it up for my first question, and I think I'll direct this at you, Susan, and then we'll go to Kathy, and then to you, Miguel. What are the top 2 to 3 ways that we can strengthen nonprofit boards? Sam or Susan. Sam goes by both names. I call them. I'll switch back and forth. Sam, you mind taking that question?
It's a nickname. So thanks, Cleve. You've mentioned one of the key things that I think is really important for strengthening nonprofit boards, and that is to make sure that you have the right people around your board table. And I think about the board like an orchestra. And if you have an orchestra that has all violins, you're only going to have one kind of music. And so I think it's really important to think about each seat as being critical to the success of the board and choosing people who can fill particular needs that you have in terms of your organization's strategy, the direction you're taking, the status of your organization at this point in time. So being clear about who should be around the table is the first. And I think it's critical that whoever is there understands the role they're playing. It's not too far-fetched to actually have job descriptions for your board members to say, this is what is expected of you. You're going to play the violin and you're going to play the bass, but being very clear about expectations of the people that you bring on the board can be so helpful to having an effective board. I would say one other thing, and that is that human beings tend to be very obedient, particularly around a board table. And so if you don't pay enough attention to your agenda as you're constructing your board meetings, you'll find that the board will talk about whatever's on the agenda. And that could, if you put minutia on there, or if you put a lot of board reporting on there, that's what the board will talk about. Give the board space to use the gifts that they bring to your board table and engage them in meaningful conversation through the wise construction of your agenda. I'll stop there.
All right, Kathy.
Yeah, so, I'm going to I'm going to dovetail on how Sam just ended, because I am one who really believes that organizations are strengthened when board members are doing board work, right? So we're recruiting people who have the skills to serve on a board. They don't have to have served on a board before, but we're not looking for people to run programs. We're not looking for people who can do our operations. We don't need a board member to run our website, right? That's a management function, whether that's a volunteer who's doing that job or a staff person who's doing that job. We're looking for board members who can review financial data and make critical decisions, who can think long range, who can help develop values and policy. And those are unique skill sets. So we want to make sure that we've recruited people with those skills. And then we're going to lean in on our role in governance. You said you don't mind a little controversy, Cleve, so I'm going to say something radical. Are you ready? I believe there's a special place in heaven for board presidents who own the agenda of that meeting, who start the document, who start deciding what we're going to talk about, rather than tasking that to the executive director. I talked to an executive director the other day who said, my board meets monthly, and I feel like I spend 2 weeks every month getting ready for the board meeting. Right? Because all of the documents, he's got to do the minutes, he's got to do the financials, he's doing all of that. So board members lean in on doing that is the best thing you can do to take pressure off of the organization right now. So board members doing governance, owning that, and that's how you get out of the minutia on an agenda, right, Sam? If the executive director is creating that agenda, or if our tradition here is that we just have report, and that's how we do things, then that's what there's going to be board discussion about. So I think one way to strengthen nonprofits right now is just clear that agenda and pick one important conversation we need to have. Do we have the right people in the room right now to meet the needs of the future, right? Do we need to conduct a board self-assessment? Do we have succession plans in place for our key leadership roles, right? Do we need to do any contingency planning right now? So have those important governance related conversations rather than letting the board meeting just be dominated by what's going on that particular month. I believe in training on roles. Most board members don't know what it means to be a board member, what that obligation is. I don't believe in cookie cutters, right? Every board member has to be this or that, and every board has to have this or that. But have those conversations, make sure that everybody knows. You have some kind of regular training about the role of the board, and what we need board members to do. Do those orientation programs. Don't tell your staff to run the orientation for the new board members. Run that yourself. Do the recruitment yourself. And the last thing that I'll mention is I believe in intentional communications, right? Handling some of the people issues that Sam was referring to a little bit ago. If I'm the board president and I know my key relationship with that executive director is the backbone of this organization, then I'm going to be intentional about making that relationship work. And I'm going to, make sure that I am sitting down and having those conversations. Do you like text or email? Do you, how do you see your role? How do you see my role? What would feel like a home run to you, right? Just getting to know each other intentionally by setting aside that time to get to know each other. I think that's critical. And that's true among and between board members as well as between board and staff.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've encouraged the board the panel to not always agree with each other. So feel free to disagree. I know you all have a lot of experience, but feel free to bring out some of the differences for folks.
Well, it's not a disagreement, but when I heard Sam talk about obedient, I thought, ooh, not me. And that's what's got me into trouble as a board member and staff and community member for that matter. But those are other stories. Well, I have a 1, 2, 3 to offer you all, and I agree with everything I've heard so far from Sam and Kathy. Well, number one is honest expectations, and something that folks, this might cause some discomfort, but I'm going to put it out there. If leadership wants a rubber stamp board, then say that, make that clear. I suppose you can clean up the language and whatnot, put out the minimal governance, liability expectations out there, but just name it. And don't go through that Mickey Mouse show up like, oh yeah, you're my boss, ha ha ha, but I'm going to do really what I really want to do. Just be real. Now, if folks are going to go along the lines of a minimalist board, to say more politely, One thing you want to make sure is that this team is capable of handling a crisis, and that includes a leadership transition, because I'm sure many of us in this space have experienced when things hit the fan in an organization and suddenly it's on the board. Uh-oh, they're not prepared to meet that, crisis, that situation. And so that's one thing to look out for. And even with a minimalist or rubber stamp board, also make sure you have your non-negotiables, including around your key programs, your key values of the organization, because it only takes one disobedient board member, to cause a ruckus and get everyone excited and involved. And so, even with minimalist boards, one must be very intentional. Number two, clear and measurable purpose, whatever that is, be it fundraising, advancing a policy change agenda, marketing the organization through brand ambassadors, whatever it is, there's measurable purposefulness. And if nothing else, so that board members don't feel like they're wasting their time and they're just kind of hanging out, they can get their little snacks and socializing done elsewhere, and so make it meaningful. Even if the meaningful purpose is modest, fine, but this is part of honest expectations. Number three, and my personal favorite, is when leadership recruits a board chair and is very intentional about that partnership and says, I've been seeing you in the community or in this board space. I think we're aligned on this. Can we partner on that? You would make a phenomenal chair. Let's move this agenda. And I know agenda, can have some negative connotations, but the way I'm presenting agenda is a game plan, a game changer. What is it that's needed with our constituents, our community, whatever it is, your wheelhouse is, right? And move that in partnership with the chair. And that's where I've seen the most success and transformations with boards.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And really appreciate people putting in questions. We already had a great question from a person named Sam, not Sam on the panel, but different Sam, and Kathy already answered it. So there's a lot of resources in this room. I know a lot of your backgrounds of the people that are attending this webinar and also on this panel. So let's use the chat as a way to share resources and get to know each other and put questions and answer some of this, because part of what we asked you to do in coming to this webinar is to come with some questions or some concerns and get some tangible results from it. So please keep those questions. Thank you for someone else putting in a question, and I'll get to some of those questions. And some of them, all of us have gotten good at multitasking. Feel free to put some answers. If you have a thought, we can have a side conversation going in addition to the main conversation. I'm going to move to a different question. And Kathy, I'll ask you first, and then we'll go to Sam and then Miguel. Which is, what's the joy that you find on serving on a board or working with a board?
So, I think it's about being a part of something that's bigger than I am, right? It's a part of something that has a really important mission that I value and honor. I think the ribbon cutting moments, right? Where you're launching something that you are a part of. I told a story just last week in a newsletter that I wrote about a time when, I heard a presentation from a staff member at an organization where I had been the board president 10 years earlier. And as she was talking about all the tremendous cool things they were doing that were dreams to us 10 years earlier, like nothing felt better than that. All of the work that we put in, all of the, I literally remember, our treasurer just walked out. Does anybody else know where the checkbook is? Like, does anybody else know how to boot up the computer? and so that's where things had been to all the way to, they're purchasing land for a wildlife refuge. So that just feels good, that sense of being a part of something like that. I happen to be a board member who loves writing those personal notes on like membership appeals and stuff. I've written thousands of those as a board member. I've written thousands of thank you notes as a board member. I think there's a real adrenaline rush from that stack of checks when it starts coming in, or when the numbers in the CRM start bumping up. I think that's a real joy as well, to know that something that I'm doing has that direct one-on-one impact.
Fabulous. Sam,
for me, there's been so much joy in sitting on boards. And I think one of the things that I've really cherished the most is helping to build board cultures and to build relationships with people on the board and on the staff, and to be able to do problem solving together that actually addresses the organization's mission, moves it forward. I think the opportunity for boards to work more closely with staff is often not realized. And I think there's just such a benefit to having that kind of partnership. And there's great opportunity for board members to mentor staff. And I think for me, there's been a lot of joy in that as well. And I think to Kathy's point, if you're part of an organization where you can help it succeed, achieve its mission, there isn't much better than that, really.
Love that.
Agreed.
Miguel.
Picking up on the board staff relationship, it's something that's often presented and discussed as taboo. The CEO is in between the board and the staff, and there are these firewalls in between. And I agree that there are some lost opportunities with that. And I think there need to be some healthy organizational dynamics and an understanding of what the boundaries are, because I believe there are boundaries between board and staff. But that being said, I agree, and again, part of that team spirit. Some of my most precious memories on the board, including, on the foundation, was when staff, were more themselves, and fully with us and sharing and troubleshooting and imagining with us what could be possible in the community. So I agree with that. Just share an experience. When I'm given a personal mission, that's what brings me joy. With one organization I was on the board on, the executive director explicitly was telling me about his plan to roll out a racial justice framework as part of the work. And at the time, it was still controversial, within their sector. And so he wanted to have folks, frankly, who had his back, on this, like, all right, let's do this. And sure enough, it played out. And sure enough, it was successful, thanks to a lot of folks, obviously under leadership. But I felt well utilized in that context. And that board eventually became part of the strategic planning. And so again, it's like, I just was reeled in, more and more and more in meaningful ways. In another organization, some fellow board members and some management staff wanted to bring more meaningful dialogue, a little bit more accountability and transparency, within the organization. And it's something, they asked me to be a little more vociferous about. So I was, back to the disobedience, kind of theme. And it was interesting. To be honest, that was hard. And that was some of the more intense experiences I've had as a volunteer at the end of the day. But it was well worth it because I believe, some fundamental institutional changes were made as a result. And the culture of the board and leadership did shift, at least somewhat, I believe. And so it was worth our collective effort. So again, personal mission is what gives me joy.
Cleve, can I ask Miguel a question?
Please jump in.
Miguel, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you talk about personal mission, right? And I think that motivates a lot of board members and making sure that we're supporting them to be able to achieve what they want to achieve as a board member. And I think that's actually one of the answers to one of the questions we've seen in the chat, which is, how do we promote engagement, right? How do we keep board members? But can you say a word or two about how to relate that to the overarching mission of the organization? I think I've seen a lot of boards where there's 8 board members that all have their own pet project, and the board meeting is about everybody reporting on their own pet project, but there isn't a shared set of what we're here to do, and everybody's kind of got a different part of that. So
I agree with you. It has to be aligned. It has to be aligned with the overall mission. And in the case of bringing the racial justice framework, this leader wasn't alone in this. There were other staff members who were aligned. Other staff members got hired, explicitly, with that lens. And some board members got recruited. And it was an emerging topic in the sector. It just wasn't baked in yet. And so it wasn't a personal thing with this CEO or with me. It was just an alignment of beliefs, experience, passion, and some experience of how to, I guess I'll use the word forcefully bring controversial issues to the table, and at the same time diplomatically and in a way that's engaging and educational. And we're seeing the consequences in this political climate of DEI and all that, and so even that was present pre the current era that we're in right now. And so it's fascinating, and that's where I find things can be very dynamic for board members, is be part of the debate, be part of this, controversy. And there's a way we can disagree and engage that does not have to follow along partisan lines. There's a way we can engage, because this is what part of being community is if we want to hang out with folks we agree with on everything, first of all, how boring. And then second, I don't think it's real. I think what really happens when you gather a group of folks that are just saying yes, 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 they're setting aside, the disagreements that they're really carrying, which, by the way, can be a danger on the board. And I would say with any team culture, but one of the dangers of a board is a board member gets there, they're looking around, they're checking the general vibe of the place, is it organized, is it efficient? But more importantly, can I be me here? Can I raise concerns here? Is that all right? Do I have permission, or how do I ask it? And then you're in the parking lot having these little sidebar conversations, and you're wondering, are you doing something wrong there, what have you? And so I believe controversy is a good thing, and a healthy dynamic.
Wonderful. Thank you. First of all, Grace has put in the poll results, if you're curious. I love seeing people ask questions and even answer each other's questions in the chat. So please keep that up, because there's so much expertise in this room, in addition to the three panelists. I'm going to move to Sam, and I'm going to ask you a question, one of the ones that we talked about earlier, and then I'm going to move to you, Kathy, with a different question, which is one that, and start kind of get to participant questions. So Kathy, I'm just going to give you yours to think about a little bit, because it's just, and I know you have a good answer for it, but is the question in chat about recruiting a board member for the first time, or recruiting a board for the first time? So don't answer that yet, because I'm going to ask Sam one, and then Miguel, and ask you about how do you engage the board, if you just want to continue riffing on that one. But first, Sam, I'd love to hear your thoughts on boards of the future. You've seen boards evolve over the last 50 years. It's amazing. And you are, you just stepped off as a chair of a highly performing board, and you're also serve on Minnesota Public Radio's board. Just curious kind of what you see as we continue to evolve the role of governance of nonprofits and organizations.
Well, one of the things, Cleve, is exactly what you started with, and that is, I think board recruitment in the future is going to look different. We're going to rely less on the networks within the board, because they're tired and they aren't producing new voices around the board table. So as you know, because of our experience together, I think open board search has a place in the future for many different types of boards. And what that will do is bring new voices around the table, some of which may feel a bit dissonant at first, because it may be a younger person, it may be someone that comes with a perspective outside of the industry that you're in, or the organization's footprint. But the board is going to have to learn to listen to those newer voices and incorporate them in strategic conversations and problem solving. And I think that's going to require a little bit different leadership among the board leaders, whether it's the board chair or committee chairs, to be listening with more open minds about different points of view. And it's going to be challenging, because coming to a consensus when you bring new voices around the table takes more time. You have to be really careful about making sure everyone has a chance to make those points. I think a couple of other things that I see happening, and this is particularly true recently with some of the changes in the thinking of the current administration around nonprofits. I think smaller nonprofits may need to look more carefully at combining. The resources are simply not available to support the number of very small nonprofits that are out there. And Kathy may want to speak to this directly, because it's her wheelhouse, but I think there'll be more collaboration of boards, and I think there'll be more consolidation of boards. I also think as we recruit new people to the board, we're going to have to be clearer and more specific about the need to fundraise. I think historically boards have soft pedaled the fundraising part of a board member's responsibility. And I don't think we can afford to do that anymore. I think looking to the future, board members are a critical element of the development strategy for any nonprofit. So I think we're going to all have to get savvy about AI and what it's going to mean in the nonprofit sector, whether it's cybersecurity. There are new topics that board members are going to have to understand to sit around the board table and help organizations, small and large. I'll stop there because there are many other things, but
Boy, yeah, boy, so rich. I can see there's just going to be so much more we're going to want to talk about that we're not going to get to. Sam, before I turn it over to Kathy, you actually addressed a little bit of Greg's question in chat, which is around how we kind of cultivate and well, this read his question, which is, can we talk about how to recognize and cultivate potential board members from a group's volunteers or program recipients, particularly the folks who don't look like their current board makeup? And I think you answered that in my mind, which is to get public about it, to put a job description out there and invite people that don't necessarily see themselves as a board member, right? Is that, would you agree with that? Or how do you, yeah.
yes, and I think that's true. And I think that's going to be a much more important method of recruiting going forward as people recognize how successful it can be. The other thing I would say is that I think board members sometimes tend to think their only accountability is showing up for board meetings. And I think that's, in my mind, a little bit wrong-headed, because the more you understand about the organization, the more you participate with its volunteers, the more you sit on committees, the better able you are to find those people who really could become board members. And I just think if all a board member does is come to 4 board meetings a year, their contributions are going to be limited by that. And I think there's a whole lot more joy to be had by a deeper participation in the board.
Terrific, thank you. And thank you for your comment, Ord, about Sequoia Parks Conservancy. I know you are a relatively new board member and have brought so much expertise because they did a public process. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn it back a little bit to one of the earlier questions to Kathy, because I think for the small organizations that have joined the webinar, I think it's a really important one, which is when you're starting out and recruiting a board for the first time, any tips or suggestions you have for that? And then Miguel, I'm going to turn to you for the question around engaging boards and keeping boards engaged. So Kathy.
So Cleve, I noticed that the question was actually addressed to Potrero, so they may, be interested in really learning much more about open board search. I will say 2 different things. One is the secret to board recruitment is being very specific and clear about what you need, right? So what are the skill sets for what are the roles going to be to build the board that we want next year? I read this kind of guidance in a book called The E-Myth Revisited, like 20 or 30 years ago when that book came out. If you're an entrepreneur and you're launching a business, think about what are the roles going to be in your business. You need a marketing person, you need somebody keeping the books, you need somebody delivering the programs, whatever those things are. What are those roles? Maybe you're the one doing it all right now, but write up the roles so that as you're going forward, building your business, you're recruiting. It is the same with nonprofits. What are the roles? What are the skill sets to fulfill those roles? What are our other needs in order to make sure that we truly represent the community that we serve? So what geographic diversity? Do we need to have people from the north part of our area and the south and the east and the west? Economic, neighborhoods, racial, age, gender balance. What are the things that we need in order to meet the needs of the future, to be able to truly deliver on our mission. Being very specific and clear about that. Gone must be the days where we're sitting around a table trying to figure out who do we know whose arm we could twist into serving on this board, right? We have to be really intentional about the specifics that we're looking for. I was recruiting for a board once where we knew we needed an attorney because we had some contract work coming up, and we needed somebody from the southern part of the area that we served. And so I called the judges in that county and asked who they knew, right? And got 6 names to begin calling that way. So people I did not know, but I was reaching out to because they had what we needed. And we asked for people who would have a heart for our mission. The other thing I'm going to mention quickly, just 3 or 4 weeks ago, I got a phone call, an urgent phone call from a woman that I knew who had found herself as the top leadership staff person, executive staff person at an organization where the executive director had just quit after being arrested for shoplifting. And the majority of board members had walked off. So she was down to 2 board members and had no clue what to do. So I said, well, first thing you need to do is get into compliance with Ohio law and with your own bylaws. You need to recruit, 3 more board members because their bylaws said 5. Kathy, I've talked to all the parents I know. I don't know where to find board members. Before I was off the phone with her, I had gotten into LinkedIn, put the term board president into the search bar, used the filters to pick her town, and said, I'm looking at the names of 120 first and second degree connections to me who have served as a board president in your hometown. When we sent her the list, sure enough, she's like, I'm in Rotary with that guy. That woman goes to my church. Turns out she knew people with the skills she needed for right then and there, and just hadn't put it together that she knew that. So I'm a big believer, and sometimes you just do a search that way depending on your situation, if you've got an urgency. Sometimes it's a luxury to really lay back and, be able to assess the board and what you're going to need going forward. Sometimes you just have to use the tools that you've got to reach out quickly and identify people in your community who have the skills you need.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
I agree. And LinkedIn makes that so much easier too. It's pretty amazing. I'm going to turn to you in a moment, Miguel. Sam, I would love for you to answer after Miguel, Caroline's question, which is, as board terms shorten and average service decreases, how can boards rethink their approach to leadership pipelines and institutional knowledge in order to remain effective? But Miguel, my question for you is just, how do you motivate boards? How do you retain great board members? What have you found work, or maybe what doesn't work for retaining really great board members?
Well, some of it comes down to training. I would say for all board members, but certainly for chairs and maybe even, committee chairs, is training on, active listening, giving and receiving feedback, and facilitation. Facilitation being the big one for chairs, because there's a Robert Rules of Order thing, and I get you have to do that. But there's also a way to engage in a discussion where folks can really talk, can really engage, can have healthy debates, add some humor into the elements, some humanity, into that conversation. And so maybe it's a training thing. I won't take that back, but maybe it's more of a green light and a permission, and maybe it's taking a board chair back to, hey, it was the last great conversation I had with folks that got kind of heated, but in a good way. Oh, yeah, it was my family or some coworkers, blah, blah. Oh, what were some elements in that? What'd you make it work? Well, we did this, did that, whatever. Oh, what was your role in it? Da, 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 da. Great. Bring that into your next chairing of the meeting, or better yet, facilitation of that meeting or that strategic planning retreat or whatever it is. So some of that might be, permission and training up on those kinds of skills. And I think that would help engagement.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. Sam, did you get that question? You want me to repeat it?
No, I see it. Thank you, Caroline. That's a great question. There's a little bit of math in the answer to this question, because depending upon how long.
Do you mind repeating the question, Sam?
But
Do you mind just repeating the question?
oh, sure. As board terms shorten and average service decreases, how can boards rethink their approach to leadership pipelines and institutional knowledge to remain effective? So, great question. That I think you have to really think about your terms and your term limits. So let's just do an example. If you have 3-year terms and your board members are allowed to have 2 3-year terms, you have only 6 years in which to identify leadership talent and get them into the proper roles and have them actually serve. So that means that engagement of those board members needs to start on day one. And it's the logical responsibility of your governance committee, if you have one, to really be watching every board member and what they bring. And importantly, you need to ask them, are you interested in a leadership role on this board? Maybe not now, but at some point. Because if they self-declare, it gives you an even better chance to move them quickly into a committee chair role or a board officer role. But the key is recognizing how long they have the opportunity to sit on the board. You need to get them ready before at least 3 to 4 years before they're going to leave the board if you want them to be either chair or a committee chair. And that engagement of board members is one of the most challenging things I found as a board chair, to be sure that every single board member sitting around that table was engaged in some way, doing something that they thought was important for the organization. And if you can get that kind of engagement early on, then the leadership pipeline sort of builds itself around personal interest and demonstrated achievement. The other thing that I think, Caroline, you didn't say about what the terms are that are involved in your organization, but if you have only 6 years, it's a fairly short period of time to get people up and running and in place, and then allow them to serve as a board leader. And you may think about other mechanisms to retain that institutional knowledge so that maybe they move on to a committee even after they've left the board, or you let them step down for a year and bring them back on. But again, the length of time is going to determine to a great deal how you build that leadership pipeline.
Terrific. One of the questions, one of the topics you open the door on, Sam, in is clearly the top that people asked for in their poll, and nobody's asked a specific question. So I want to bring it here to hear Kathy and Miguel's perspective on this fundraising. And there's nothing like fundraising to terrify many board members. And I happen to love fundraising, but I think that's because of, I like sales and that's comfortable for me. But I'm curious your thoughts on fundraising and board members, Kathy and Miguel, and how we can equip and help board members be more effective in either the ask or opening the door for the executive director to make the ask. Just curious on how you want to, how you think about that, either regarding what Sam said or a different perspective. Miguel, you want to go, and then Kathy?
Sure. One thing I've seen time and again that does not work is when a board is resistant to fundraising, they have a trainer coming in, trying to guilt trip them / train them into becoming fundraisers. And yeah, that tends to fall flat. What I have seen very effective is when the board is explicitly a fundraising board, period. And there are other responsibilities, but they are clear that they are a fundraising board. There are collective goals. There are goals, be it institutional and or individual donor corporate fundraising. The strategies don't matter, but there's a dollar amount that board members are expected to raise, and it's just crystal clear, and they have the full support of the staff in making that happen. So that's been the most effective. The most hybrid approach I've ever seen is I've seen fundraising efforts be more based on board members' network, be it institutional or individual, and they are asked, are you willing on behalf of the organization to introduce us or help us engage with this group or with this individual? And there's a variety of answers. There are some board members that are absolutely not. There are others like, okay, happy to make an introduction, but executive director, whoever, you're going to take it from there, right? Yes, wonderful. But here's my favorite story among all of this. I was working on a board that was a hodgepodge. It was a mix of folks who were comfortable with fundraising and others that were not. And there was one board member who was very well networked. And, time and again, we were begging and begging him to, fundraise. We asked him, so no, no, no. And finally, just ever so casually, we asked if he'd be willing to host a house party. He said, oh yeah, I love parties. And he goes, I'm not going to pitch, right? I go, no, but we're going to follow up with everyone who attends. Is that okay? Oh yeah, that's on you. And the guy was great. He was a fantastic host, very personable, Irish dude, just very the gift of gab, everyone laughing and tears. It was beautiful. And of course, the staff, we just followed up right after that. And it was one of our more successful, house party fundraisers in a long time at the time. So anyway, it can work. And it comes down to essentially negotiating and having a conversation with folks who are would-be fundraisers and asking what they are willing to do. And it's not necessarily the pitch or the ask.
Kathy.
Early in my career, I did a lot of, teaching board members to, everybody should have a give GAD, and there should be an expectation that all board members participate in fundraising and in making gifts. And over the years, I have become persuaded by younger thought leaders, by people of color who are thought leaders in our sector, that we've baked some inequities into the nonprofit sector by setting those kinds of expectations for board members and choosing board members for their ability to fundraise, to the exclusion of other things that they can bring into the boardroom. And so while I still believe that every member of the board has a responsibility for ensuring that there are adequate resources to do what the board is, set as the goals for that organization, I do think it doesn't necessarily have to be that everybody brings in a certain dollar amount or even is willing to make the ask. When board members express that terror of fundraising, or when I have somebody telling me, as I have many times, I will not raise money, I won't ask my friends for money, I give a lot to this organization and no consultant is going to come in here and tell me that I have to fundraise, right? And what they're afraid of is the moment of solicitation. If you can get them involved in cultivation, right? If you can get them involved in stewardship is usually where you can really get somebody involved. Okay, Miguel, I hear you. But you know what? I wonder, we just got a gift from somebody that we don't know very well. Would you be willing to call them up and ask them, thank them on behalf of the board? All we need you to do is thank them. Miguel's going to say yes, and suddenly Miguel is involved in fundraising, right? I mean, there is a role for everybody. So I believe in something called an individual board member fundraising agreement, where you go through the strategies that you use in your organization to bring resources in, whether it's grants, membership, selling merchandise at local, tabling at events, whatever those things are, all the way to the peer-to-peer stuff. And, sit down with new board members and say, which of these things can you do? Right. Going into the boardroom and saying our gala is next week, is next month, and we need everybody to sell a table is a loser, right? Board members are going to opt out of that. But if you can sit down with them in advance and you have two board members who say, yeah, I can sell tickets to our gala, well, then that's what you can hold them accountable to. So I'll drop a link in the chat to a template that I have for an individual board member fundraising agreement that you would change up depending on the strategies that you use at your organization, but it's working with them one-on-one where their comfort level is, supporting their efforts. That's how you get more board members engaged in making sure that the organization has the resources it needs.
Terrific. Sam, I'm going to give you a softball question. Maybe it's a softball question, but there's a question around increasing the diversity of a board. And when I see the word diversity, I mean in all different ways of what that word means. So how do we bring on, and I think this specific question was somebody in Southern Utah, but how do you bring on new board members that are not like the board, and bring in new skills and really make sure they're representative of a larger group of people?
Is your question, Cleve, how do you find them, or how do you actually incorporate them in your board?
More how you find them, I think, but probably both. I mean, they're related in a sense, I think.
Well, I think it takes genuine focus to begin to look at the board's diversity in a broad range of categories. And we've all, I think, been involved in boards that have tried that, some more successfully than others. And normally you're going to need some help, whether it's finding people who are sitting in the network that you'd like to penetrate, or getting help from a firm like Potrero Group, or reaching out to people in your community to say, this is a challenge for us and we really need to find this person, whether it's someone with a particular academic background or experience, lived experience, or people of color, or people of a certain age. It takes work, and I think the board has to decide that it's willing to spend the time and put the resources against it. It's a full-time job for a governance committee to really do this well, and finding you really do have to go outside your own board network if you're going to increase the diversity, and no good deed goes unpunished. When you're successful, you then need to really think carefully about how do you welcome these new people who bring new voices, who bring new perspectives, who may be of a different age than most of the people on the board, or a different color, or a different gender. There's really important work to be done to engage those folks very quickly, to help them feel welcomed, and to make sure that their voices are heard, because you are wanting them for a different voice. So you have to be prepared to listen to that different voice.
Terrific. And there's another question along the same topic. So I want to just also invite Kathy or Miguel just to chime in terms of bringing in younger, next generation, just other ways of including diversity in the most holistic sense. Anything else you two of you want to add?
Well, I think it takes real work to hold an intergenerational board together, and you have to be intentional. And two areas to really pay attention to are communications and board meetings. So Sam, when you were talking just now about you have to be prepared to listen, I mean, I bet you have, as I have, and probably Miguel and Cleve too, have been present to hear a board member completely shoot down a newcomer who we've purposely gone out and recruited. And so as the outside consultant, you could say, I wonder if you're aware that Cleve was just offering an idea from a different perspective that you want in this boardroom, right? So yeah, you just have to genuinely be open to the different perspectives. I've written articles on this, on holding intergenerational boards together. I'm very often asked, where can we find some younger people to serve on the board? And my answer is they're all around you, right? But it's very likely that you've run them off. You've run them off with unbelievable, god-awful email chains, right? When they would really prefer to be in a portal or using a shared file of some kind, right? A different way of doing communications. Or you've run them off because the meetings don't begin anywhere, they go on forever, they don't end anywhere. The people that are younger than I am, younger generations, will not tolerate having their time wasted like that, right? So why come to a board meeting if it's just going to be endlessly, not really getting anywhere, and I'm not really helping anything by being here, I'm going to go someplace where my time is better served. So we have to be mindful of that. We have to take care that our meetings, if we're going to ask people to come to a meeting, that they have to be meaningful. And if we're going to have, communications between meetings, that they are clean and clear and easy to follow. Those are two strategies that I would suggest off the bat, to use glittering generalities, by the way.
Miguel, anything you want to add in there?
Sure. First of all, have a clear and honest reason as to why.
Yeah.
And if the answer is to check a box, I think a lot of folks are going to say
do
no
our
thanks.
social media for free.
Right. So just be really clear about the why is, and, and see if, folks are aligned with that. The second, and this goes back to, I think, training. If folks are trained in facilitation, they know you don't shoot people down in a conversation, new or, not so new. And so I think it goes back to, that training as well. And what I also find helpful is that, there was a time where I was recruited to a board to take and this is a quote, to take the Latino seat. And this is in spite of having a constituency that was way over the one out of, whatever that number was, right? And that felt funny. That felt, I did it anyway, because I felt it was important, to represent it, to be in that space. However, that was not the way to present it. And ideally, the way to present it was, we need more voice for impacted members of the Latino community and who have, how do I say it, experience in the institutional system sector. And we see you as one of those. And because our agenda is about to include, expand into, explore, again, a mission base, and back to the why. And I think that could be compelling. What also might be compelling is if it's a cohort kind of thing, depending on the size of the board, of course. But what if it was a cohort of, a couple of different folks, or even more, right? Coming in like a critical mass, and they are very clearly brought in because, we're getting homogenous in here. We need you. We need fresh, and they could help hold the group accountable to, like, all right, you said you wanted fresh, new, different. Now we're here. And by the way, what are our communication systems? Can we text? Can we WhatsApp? Can we, and being open to that and being receptive.
Miguel, I think that cohort point is really important. I think it can give the new people on the board a group to rely on, so they're not the only new person or the only different person. So I'm glad you made that point.
Last question, and and then I'm going to ask you all to give us your parting words of wisdom. So give you a couple minutes to think about it. If you had a piece of advice from your experience working with boards, and you want people to remember this, if they forget everything else we talked about, you want them to remember this, what will that be? So that's the question after this question. So just give you a minute or two to think about that one. But one of the questions in chat I wanted to get to before that one is, do you advise boards to stay engaged with former board members? And are there any recommended best practices? And any of you want to chime in on that one? Sam, you're smiling, so maybe you want to.
Well, I'm smiling because it happens to be a timely question for me. Tomorrow, I will be hosting an event here at my home for former board members of Minnesota Public Radio, a board on which I've served for a very long time, and where we've never invited former board members to come together again. And we're very excited about it because these are people who care about the organization, who gave a lot of time at one point in their lives. And given everything that's going on with public media, this is an ideal time to update them. But I think it is important, and I think very few boards make the time to make that happen.
Others, Miguel or Kathy?
I think anybody who's got a passion for an organization and has some time and interest to give, that, we need to find a way to make sure that we have, included them in some role as they want to be included. Those people have a lot to bring to the table. So yes, I believe it doesn't have to be in bylaws. Don't have to write into the bylaws, specific board role or export roles or whatever. But definitely have people, if they want to be engaged, find ways to engage them.
Something to put in the toolbox is to consider making it like an interview or casual interview style, because sometimes, depending on the board, the institution, of course, but sometimes there can be horror stories that former board members might give, or maybe they went through a particular rough chapter of that organization, and that could scare away or taint the new, oh, what did I sign on to? And so maybe framing them as interview a former board member. And basically, it's get their feedback, their input, their experience from their perspective, and even using that language just in case they taint the new board member's experience.
Love that. And I very much appreciate Greg's comment around maybe the next generation doesn't know what the board actually does. I wonder if we have a bit of a secret society going on. And I think that's really, really important question to ask yourself. How are you engaging the next generation, and what messages? So thank you so much. Just want to call out, and then I want to ask you for your because we need to wrap up in a couple minutes. So I want to ask you in a minute or less your parting wisdom for this group. And if you want to start, we'll go to Kathy, Miguel, and then the last word with you, Sam.
So thanks again, Cleve, for this. I have twice now posted a link to the page on my website where I post a bunch of resources. And one of the resources that's there is a checklist for orientation. So when you have new board members come in, I posted a checklist of things that you make sure that you're going over with them. And that can include the culture and how we make decisions here, but what the job of a board member is, how our budget works, how our programs work, et cetera. So make sure that you're intentional about that. Parting thoughts. Going back to the beginning, boards work on what we put in front of them. And more governance is less management. The more boards are leaning in on governance, on the role that's uniquely theirs that they cannot delegate to others, the less interest they have in getting involved in management or programs, right? They're doing the highest level stuff. So writing agendas so that those important questions are the first thing on the agenda. Maybe the end of the agenda when we're all racing around trying to get out of here. That's when we can adopt our minutes. That's when we can do those other things. I believe in consent agendas too. But time for discussion, that time we have together is precious. Let's not waste it listening to reports that we could read. Let's not waste it doing, just informational stuff. Let's have critical conversations in the boardroom and co-create this organization. So that's my thought.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Miguel.
First of all, I got to apologize to you, Cleve, because you were encouraging us to debate healthy disagreements, and I was fishing and lurking, and I could not find any. So anyway, it's a pleasure, collaborating with you, Kathy and Sam. Board members are often recruited with one of two messages. Either one, oh, it's no big deal, meetings, you don't have to go to all of them. And okay, we see where that's headed. And the other one is, we need this, we need that, right? Wouldn't it be something if the executive director and or board chair, or both, better yet, would check in with board members and ask them, what would you like to experience here? And they're going to give their polite answer, but really unpack that. And it doesn't mean the organization can necessarily deliver everything, but get a sense of, you're important, we see you, what would you like to experience? Because we know your time, your energy is valuable. And really, check in with them on that. And just like you would with a staff person, check in with them, from time to time, even if it's once a year. Hey, let's have a one-on-one, how's it going? Is this fulfilling your experience? What is it that we can do? So we start meeting folks halfway, and it's not only, we don't need anything from you other than your warm body, or, we need you to, perform, for us.
Right. Sam, bring us home.
Well, I think there's a reason that we've all been doing board effectiveness work for as long as we have. It's really hard to build great boards. And the reason is that the model is a little flawed. If you think about it, a board is a small group of people who gather infrequently to make important decisions about organizations they know very little about. So if you really accept that the premise is flawed, then the work that you're doing, signing up for things like this, is exactly what's needed. I think just learning as much as you can about how to improve the effectiveness of your board is really great. And it's an ongoing task. I mean, we talked about boards of the future. Boards have evolved over time. The issues we're facing are evolving. So I would just encourage you not to stop learning, continue to seek these kinds of opportunities, because it's hard work and there's a lot of joy in it.
A perfect way to end. You can see why, I think everybody on the call can see why I invited Sam and Miguel and Kathy to join us. We did put a closing poll here, so I just wrap us up. Feel free to give us some feedback on this process. A couple of announcements before we end here. First of all, if you want to stay in touch with each other, I encourage you to put your name and email address in the chat, because there's this is a ton of resources here. I know some people had to leave for calls at the top of the hour, but there's a lot of great experience on this call. So I would encourage you to stay in touch with each other as participants. We will be sending out a recording of this, and we'll be posting it on YouTube. So I know a number of people couldn't make it and asked for that. So if you registered for this webinar, please, you will get a recording. Please pass it on. I believe, and I know Sam and Miguel and Kathy do, that the future really of our country and our democracy rests on stronger boards. So, thank you for your interest. Thank you for showing up. When we post a webinar like this, we don't really know if anybody's going to come. So it really means a lot that you showed up and that you engaged. And Kathy and Sam and Miguel, just so much wisdom. It makes me want to do a full day in-person sessions someplace beautiful to have this conversation. So maybe we'll figure out a way to do that, because there's just the fact that so many people want to give up a part of their day to talk about boards is a testament to how important this work is. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that Sam and Petero co-authored an article in Stanford Social Innovation Review on open board search. That the link, Grace posted a link to that, and it's also available on the website. I would also be remiss if I didn't draw your attention to the fact that Kathy and Miguel are consultants in the space and are often available and very giving of time or modest rates to help out organizations. So encourage you to reach out to them. Miguel, feel free to post your information if you have it. I know Kathy's posted her links. We are going to continue this webinar series in September with focusing on the executive recruitment process. And that will be on Wednesday, the 24th of September at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be hosted by one of our search leads. And on the right of the slide that I'm showing is a place to sign up for our newsletter and to follow us on LinkedIn if you haven't done that already. By the way, if you do go to the Stanford Social Innovation Review article, I'd love it if you posted a comment there, because it shows them that people are actually reading what we put in, and our team and Sam put a lot of work and time into that effort. So again, thank you. Special thank you to Sam, Miguel, and Kathy for giving up your time in afternoon and evening for this. I'm also joined by a couple of colleagues, Steph Alexander, who's on camera. Some of you have worked with her, and Andrew Leiter and Grace. Thank you for being the quiet but ever important and ever present member of the tech. Oh, Amy Zhang's here too. Hi, Amy, from the Petero team. So thank you for staying in touch, everybody, and have a great evening and afternoon. And please keep doing this important work. Right.